right, we're talking with Jeff Brinkley today, and we're going to interview him about his journey. He's had a lot of interesting stops along the way, as do all of the people on the show. And so we're interested to hear about his story. And Jeff, I wanted to just start with your early background, where your parents didn't have any particular religious persuasion or belief, and I just wondered how you then described yourself as having the 60s became your faith and religion. So take us from the beginning.
Okay, well, I think we all have to believe in something. Even though we might call that nothing, we're still believing that nothing is something. And my father was a Jewish atheist, and my mother was a lapsed Lutheran, and there was no God in our upbringing, no church, no synagogue, nothing like that. So when I came of age, as it were, and needed to latch on to something, the anarchy, the Marxism, the goofiness of the 60s was there. And I guess you could say it became a sort of religion, a place to hang my hat and have some system of belief.
Was there any particular part of that you feel like you glommed onto?
All of it. I was all in.
All right.
Yeah.
So, that's true for a lot of people who were brought up then. And so I read in your bio that you shied away from God and organized religion. Okay, so, we're talking about the 60s. That wasn't an organized religion, and so that was attractive. Why was it something that you shied away from, organized religion?
Well, I guess because it was a rebellion against authority and establishment and organization. Mm-hmm. So anything that would represent that or include that became attractive.
Mm-hmm. Because why? I mean, I hear that a rebellion against authority because you thought authority was, how would you finish that sentence?
Wow. Authoritarian.
You're not allowed to use the word in the definition, so yeah. I mean, it's true that people want freedom, and so my guess is that's a big part of that. You went on to describe periods of your life as an endless searching for a way to fill the void. So apparently, rejecting authority didn't do it.
No, of course not. It never really does, although we can think it does. We can talk ourselves into it. And I think I did a pretty good job most of the time talking myself into it, but there were moments when I guess you could say my guard was down, and I guess the only phrase I can use for those moments is that God snuck in.
Oh my, there's a whole lot there. You actually said in what I read that you prepared for us it was an intrusion by God, and you said, whew, that was close. So we almost got you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And more specifically, the Roman Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because at that time, I knew of Catholicism, Judaism, and Protestantism, and the 20 zillion varieties of Protestantism. And Catholicism seemed at that point the most appealing, and so I looked further into it, ended up going to, I guess what would be now the RCIA classes, catechism class they called it then, mm-hmm. And they started talking about papal infallibility, and that's where they lost me.
Because that was too constrictive?
It was too constrictive and too authoritarian and too all-encompassing. I have to admit, I still have a problem with it. Mm-hmm.
It hasn't gone away entirely.
It hasn't gone away, no.
Well, that's the human dilemma, I think, yes. Right there. But, as you were searching, it seems like you were looking beyond Catholicism then, and you went to Judaism. Can you describe that period?
Yes, I encountered a bunch of people who were very, what's the word, very believing Jews. And because of my own background, my father being Jewish, I was interested in that. They triggered that interest in me, so I started reading and asking them and talking with them and meeting with them, and eventually ended up speaking with a rabbi, a conservative rabbi, as opposed to Orthodox or Reform, and ended up studying with him for a year with no intention at that time of converting and becoming officially Jewish, but that's what happened.
So you made a choice.
I made a choice, and at the time it seemed like a good one.
Mm-hmm. But it didn't end there, did it?
Oh, it never ends there.
Well, the next stop on your path was Buddhism and Taoism, and it seems like that was a very brief exit.
Yes and no. That because I read widely and broadly, not always so deeply, but at least widely. And Buddhism and Taoism were interesting topics, especially when talking about mindfulness and being and lack of being and so on and so forth. And that interested me. Lots of things interest me. So I studied that. I went on meditation courses and workshops and so on, and tried to practice meditation, Buddhist meditation. And always, as much as I was into it and enjoyed it, when I enjoyed it, there was something lacking. And that was God, because Buddhists have no need for God.
Mm-hmm.
They don't discount God, well, some do, but they have no need for God. God doesn't factor into Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a lack for me.
So as you missed the God connection, even though you were sort of avoiding him and not wanting him to sneak in, so to speak, then you went to Byzantine Catholicism and orthodoxy.
Right.
So how did those two fit?
Well, they fit because they're almost the same thing. But how they fit with me was after converting to Judaism, I went to Israel and spent 5 years there. And my thinking, my orientation was always to the east.
Mm-hmm.
East to Jerusalem, east with Buddhism, east with Taoism. So I guess there's a bit of that in my DNA,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
if you will, and there is.
Mm-hmm.
So that was attractive. My wife was a lapsed Byzantine Catholic, and I had an experience at the grotto in Emmitsburg, in which I was confronted with, I don't know what the exact term would be, with
Well, some people would call it an encounter.
okay, encounter, yeah, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
I encountered God through the Theotokos, through Our Lady. And I was just standing there in front of a statue of her, and something happened. And at that point, I said, I need to become a Catholic. And I need to become a Byzantine Catholic. To make that long story a little shorter, we then found out where it was possible to do that. There was a Byzantine Catholic parish in Beltsville, and so we started going there and met with the very similar story to the Jewish story. Started meeting with the priest and attending the liturgy, the Mass, and eventually I decided that I would do this more formally, and so we met regularly on a weekly basis for over a year, And I was subsequently baptized, confirmed, and received Holy Communion. Then, so what's the connection with orthodoxy? That's a huge story. That's many faceted and very complicated and sometimes downright nasty.
But it was still the East,
It was still the East.
and so that connection was there.
Right. At one point, while we were going to the Byzantine Catholic parish, St. Gregory's, the deacon there made a comment that struck me kind of strangely, which was, he said, well, we're Orthodox light. And I thought, well, what does that mean?
Hmm.
So I started looking into that and thinking about it, and I think, I don't like light things. I don't like light beer.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like what I've been hearing or
Right.
a lot of hearing.
Yeah, I don't like light beer or light wine or light religion.
Uh-huh.
So we looked into orthodoxy and thought, well, he's right in the sense that Eastern Catholicism was orthodoxy light, but not totally right. So we hopped over to the Orthodox Church, stayed there for a few years, and had some very bizarre, very strange encounters. Not all with God, with some strange priests and people who call themselves prophets and all manner of.
So it was a colorful stop.
Oh yes, yes. Worthy of something from Dostoevsky or Kafka.
Wow. Well, your journey does have what you might consider now a happier, I shouldn't say ending to you though, should I? No.
It's not
Happier
over.
stop. Right. Well, we'll leave it at that, a happier stop. So up to this point, before we get to, the conclusion, I'm wondering, what, looking back, would you say to people searching like you did? Can you give them advice for that kind of searching expedition that you took on?
Wow, giving advice is not my strong suit. I mean, I'm good
Well,
at doing it,
maybe-
but it's not usually good advice.
How about this? If you were to do it over again, were there things that you might change?
Well,
Maybe not.
yeah, but I mean, until you get that chance, it's only speculation. What would I do over? Well, I might do this over or that over, but
Right.
it's as somebody once said to me, it's all part of life's great tapestry.
Mm-hmm.
And without the faulty, I'm not familiar with
Thread.
knitting. Say again.
Thread or
Faulty thread or the faulty knitting. The rug, the tapestry doesn't have as much character.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I guess a better analogy would be a handmade tapestry as opposed to a machine-made tapestry.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you should use that image because as you've been talking, I've been thinking of a patchwork quilt.
Okay.
So I like your tapestry a lot better. They're a lot more elegant. And that would be more my style too.
Okay.
But I think what you're saying is that a journey or searching is normal. It's almost necessary before you can get to know yourself and God and sort of answer the questions that you said were born into you in your DNA, right?
I think that's a good way to put it, yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And to discount any part of the journey, even though the parts that you might label as being bad or horrific, is to discount, in a sense, the journey itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because those things are there, they were presented with them, I think, for a reason. We don't always know what that reason is.
Yeah.
And it's becomes part of what we are. I mean, if we hadn't partaken of the apple, then we might still be in Eden.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not. We did, and we're
Mhm.
not. So
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm thinking of the Bible verse, and I don't have it exactly right in my mind, that suffering, i.e. the bumps along the way, produces character, perseverance, hope, and all of that.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's, I think, part of what the beauty of the tapestry is, even though we don't think of it as beautiful necessarily along the way, right?
When's this going to be over?
Right. Well, there's more to come, and I guess I'm wondering about your experience of hearing the organ here at St. Joseph. If you would maybe tell that story briefly about how meaningful that was, and how that sort of had you make this stop here at St. Joseph's.
Okay. Well, a little brief background. My wife and I had been coming here on and off over the years, and she has completely fallen away from the church now. Has no interest in coming back, and that's her choice. You know, and so we were both in a period of several years of not being at or with the church, and away from, for a number of reasons. And we still, I shouldn't admit this publicly, but we still came every year to get our calendars, our Advent calendars and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was here in December just before COVID struck, and went into the narthex to get the calendars, and somebody was practicing the organ, and it just hit me like a brick that I need to come back. It took me 5 months to finally get here, but I got here, and here I am. Whether I remain here or not remains to be seen. I gave up on crystal balls a long time ago. So.
But you're making a stop here for a reason, and I think you described it as God pierced through the hardness of your heart.
Yeah.
And I think that's a significant thing to admit about a journey like yours, that you've made lots of stops, but maybe that piercing hadn't really happened, and so that you feel now, I think in your words, that you want to bloom or plant some blossoms. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's a saying that, blossom where you're planted, or bloom where you're planted.
Mm-hmm.
And much of my life has been spent trying to blossom somewhere other than where I'm planted.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm here. And this is, I have to accept. And I'm willing to accept. This is where I am. I'm in Eldersburg, Maryland. And my options for communing with God and growing in His presence are really, as far as I'm concerned, and given my orientation, my background, and my beliefs, here or really not really anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And so it means taking what I think or have judged to be negative along with what is absolutely and unfalteringly positive about being here. And since Father John and Father Armando have been here, St. Joseph's is an entirely different place from my experience of it in the past. Mm-hmm. It's like night and day. And I could kind of preach about that, but that's not my job.
Well, it sounds like, to keep with this metaphor, that you've found some fertile soil.
Yes.
In which to do some of the blossoming.
Yes.
And we can see that you have a lot to offer. to a lot of people, and I think your participating in this interview today has a lot to do with that. You're
Thank
willing to share your journey and be vulnerable, and I think there are a lot of people that are going to answer some questions as a result of this, so I thank you.
I hope so. Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've had a wonderful time talking with Jeff, and we look forward to the next journey. Maybe it's yours.